Why is nobody watching the Guilty Gear anime? Guilty Gear Dual Rulers has everything it needs to be the perfect anime adaptation, but after just 4 episodes, it's one of the worst performing shows this season, which is a shame because Guilty Gear fans were really excited to finally get their own anime, and as someone who loves the games, I think this is the perfect start if you're a new fan. But as much as I'd love to give this anime a 10 out of 10, there's clearly a couple of reasons why it's not doing very well. That's why in this video, I'm going to share my first impression of Guilty Gear Dual Rulers, discuss the blatant flaws that are holding it back, and explain why I think it's the perfect show for new and old fans. Just be warned that this will contain some spoilers for the first 4 episodes. Now, if you're watching this video, then you probably already know about Guilty Gear. It's a Japanese fighting game made by Arc System Works, the studio that made Dragon Ball FighterZ. Since then, they've been a huge name in fighting games, but now they're trying to break into the global market and compete with companies like Capcom and Bandai Namco. Which brings us to the new anime, Dual Rulers. Guilty Gear Dual Rulers is an original story that takes place right after the events of the latest game, Guilty Gear Strive. So right away, one of the first reasons this anime is perfect for new fans is because it's a self-contained story. If you're already a fan of Guilty Gear, this means you get a brand new story outside of the games. Plus, it's got a bunch of the best characters from the games like the one-armed samurai Baiken, the US ladies man and master swordsman Johnny, and the yo-yo slinging mercenary Bridget. And they even got most of the original voice actors to play these characters. So if you're an old fan, then Dual Rulers really feels like it was made just for you. Which is great because as cool as it is to get an original story, part of the excitement is seeing the characters we already love from the games getting the love they deserve. But if you're completely new to Guilty Gear, then this anime is for you as well. Dual Rulers is a story that centers around Sin Kisuke, and if you play fighting games, then the reason why they chose Sin over the actual main character of the game's sole bad guy makes perfect sense. Sol has been the main character for 20 years now, so because Guilty Gear is trying to get new fans, it only makes sense that they would give it a new face. It's the same thing Street Fighter did when they shifted from Ryu over to Luke. Anyway, the story follows Sin as he encounters a brand new villain by the name of Unica, who wants to destroy all of the gears, including his parents. Now, if you don't play Guilty Gear, then you probably don't know what a gear really is or why it's actually called Guilty Gear. But thankfully, Dual Rulers takes the time to give basic recaps of the main story. To answer the question about gears, they're basically characters like Sin, who have special powers that were used during a massive war known as the Crusades. Clearly, if you're a new fan, then you don't need to play the games to watch the anime. You can enjoy the anime while also learning the basic story. Then, if you like Guilty Gear after watching the anime, you can try out the games. So really, it's a win-win for everybody. That being said, this takes us into the first big problem with the anime, namely how the anime balances the plot with lore dumps. But real quick before I get into that, make sure to become a channel member if you're enjoying the video. You get custom badges and emojis to show off during our weekly live streams, and you can pick which series I cover next. Now, Dual Rulers is by no means just a recap of the games, but while it is an original story that everyone can enjoy, there's clearly a favor against new fans. The first episode starts by giving a basic summary of the main story. Mankind discovers magic, they combine magic and science for all kinds of technology and living weapons. Some of these weapons, the gears, start a war which leads to mankind hating the gears. It's after this war that Sin's parents, Kai and Dizzy, eventually meet each other and start a family, which amounts to roughly 3 minutes of lore. Now on the one hand, because Guilty Gear has a pretty goofy story, I think you need that quick summary so that new fans can actually follow everything. That being said, Dual Rulers kind of suffers from a case of telling not showing. Typically you want viewers to invest in characters naturally. The Dual Rulers kind of has to walk you through that investment. The whole point of the first episode is that the new villain Unica stops Kai and Dizzy's official wedding, and they end up frozen. But these are 2 characters that we just met. So if you're a new fan, then this all happens kinda fast. And you wouldn't care as much about Kai and Dizzy because you just met them. So that's why the episode starts off with these 2, because it sets them up as some of the most important characters in the story. And this is where Dual Rulers runs into some problems, because its main goal is clearly to offer a story for both new and old fans. But the structure and pacing of the story kinda make it so that it's not as interesting anything unless you already like Guilty Gear. For example, while it's great that you get to see a bunch of the regular characters, some of their introductions aren't executed that well. Characters like Sin, Kai, and Dizzy get proper introductions. Then you have Johnny, who shows up at the wedding because he's a friend of the family and used to be Dizzy's guardian. But they also throw in the fact that he's the captain of the Jellyfish Pirates, which is good to know for the games, but after 4 episodes is still completely irrelevant. Later on, they introduce Ram Lethal, but don't really mention any of her relevance in the story, even though she's actually a member of Sin's family. But then they give a complete lore dump for Elfelt, and even mention that she has her own death metal band. So when it comes to the characters, it's not that bad, but it could be better. On the one hand, they kind of just throw the characters into the story, assuming you're already familiar with them, which if you're brand new to Guilty Gear can be hard to follow. But they do try their best to contextualize the characters, especially considering the whole point of the anime is to promote the games. So while it might make the story feel somewhat crowded, it does allow for everyone's fan favorite characters to make appearances in a coherent way. Plus, the team behind the anime, Studio Sans again, writes the characters so they're all consistent with their personalities in the games. Sin is still the same goofy meathead, Bridget is still the same fun-loving chill character, Elfelt is just as bouncy and energetic as she is in the games. So while you might not get a full appreciation for these characters, the anime at least does a good job of making them accurate to the games. Because of this, you do get a good feel for their chemistry, and you can begin to understand why so many people love these characters. But as far as the story goes, that's really my only praise. As of episode 4, I'm not that excited about the story so far. And this goes back to the issue of balancing lore dumps and plots. This is not an anime like Cyberpunk that's sort of its own thing. Dual Rulers ties into the story of the games, so they have to spend a good amount of time catching new fans up to speed. This means that you usually spend a third of each episode explaining some of the lore. On top of that, you typically get about 2 minutes of recap from the last episode. And with only one core, possibly only 8 episodes, that means that the time spent on the actual plot and character development is fairly limited. Now, the upside to this is that Sanzigen finds a decent balance between explaining the lore and fleshing out the story in action. You do get some cool scenes like Soul and Sin riding on a motorcycle through the desert, Unica making this big attack against the president, and the newest episode even shows some great scenes between Unica and Bridget that flesh out their characters. At the same time, there really isn't a lot that happens even after 4 episodes. The first episode is just lore dump, then Sin fights a bear, there's a wedding, but then the wedding gets crashed. The second episode follows basically the same formula, with Sin and Soul traveling to the US, Unica attacking the president, and the only real fight is between Sin and Unica. The third episode mainly consists of the characters investing Unica in her secret plans. And then while the fourth episode has those nicer character moments, all that really happens is that Sin gets revealed as the new king of the gears while Dizzy is frozen. And this is where I think the anime suffers the most. It's a fun watch for anyone who likes Guilty Gear, but if you only have a casual interest in Guilty Gear, or you have no idea what it is, then this isn't really the greatest introduction because as a standalone story, it's not that entertaining. It's a lot of exposition and dialogue, and especially considering this is a fighting game adaptation, the fights are pretty lacking. It's the kind of story that's pretty cool the first time you watch it, but it's far from something like Cyberpunk where you could watch it again and again. So clearly a big reason Dual Rulers doesn't get that much hype is because there really isn't that much to talk about. It's cool for old fans to finally get an anime, but beyond that there isn't that much to invest in. Unica is a decent character, and I can see how she has a lot more potential, but as the villain, her motivation is pretty bland, and we don't know anything else about her yet. If you're brand new to Guilty Gear, this anime isn't going to be nearly as exciting as something like Fire Force or My Hero Vigilantes. Now, it is worth mentioning that Sanzigen actually does a great job with the animation. Sanzigen made their name after this great AMV they did a while back. And just like that AMV, they go for a balance of 3D and 2D animation. And while it looks much better in a 2-minute AMV, they do a great job with this style of animation in the anime. Obviously, because it's 3D, it's not going to look as great as your typical 2D anime, but it's way more polished than the CGI in any anime, and the characters are just as expressive as any other anime. And like I said before, Sans again does a great job of explaining the story to fans and making the characters accurate to the games while also trying to present an original story. So do I think Dual Rulers is this underrated gem? No. As much as I love Guilty Gear, I don't think this anime is for everyone. But if you love the games, or you've always wanted to check them out, but you're not sure if they're for you, then Dual Rulers is the perfect show. It's a decent story, and while it does have its flaws, there's still potential for the story to pick up in the next few episodes. So while it's not the perfect story, I think Dual Rulers is a perfect show for anyone who likes the games and really just wants more Guilty Gear. But what do you think? How would you rate this show? What do you think are the pros and cons? Share your thoughts and see what everyone else has to say down in the comments. I'll pick my favorite and share it as comment of the week on my community tab. And don't forget to become a channel member. You'll get badges and emojis, you can pick which series I cover next, and you can even get credited in future videos. Also check out my other recommendations, which you can find in the playlist linked right here. Until then, thank you for watching, and I hope to hear from you soon.